Okay, I'm here to talk to you about on-demand texture streaming, or how we made all our CODs fit on one console. My name is Chris Fowler. I'm a principal engineer here at Sledgehammer Games in Melbourne, although technically rebrand Australia now, which is great. I'll discuss sort of a bunch of vernacular that I'll use throughout the thing. I'll say words like Gen 8. So Gen 8 describes the 8th generation of our consoles. So the PlayStation 4, the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One, the Xbox One X, the Xbox One S, and then I'll also refer to Gen 9, which is the latest, the newest generation, which is your PS5, your Xbox Series S, and your Xbox Series X. And I'll also use the terms MTX, which is to describe our microtransactional content. Things that are optional for players to use that don't affect the outcome of a game. So skins for the weapons, the operators, the equipment, all of that type of stuff. I'll use the word fast file. That's to describe a binary blob of data that is not streamed, how we load it. And then I'll also use the term XPack. And an XPack is like a binary blob of data that we stream. So think of them as like a zip file that we just sort of jam all our images and sounds into, and we pick when we're going to stream those parts of it, which is what I'll be talking about mostly today. A megabyte, which is 1,000,000 bytes, a gigabyte, which is 1,000 megabytes, and a petabyte, which is 1,000,000 gigabytes. We deal in data that big. All right, so the problem. What was the problem we had? Space. Usable hard drive space. On a PlayStation 4, you only had 407 gigabytes. Actually, on an Xbox One, it's even worse at 362. When the new generation consoles came out, there was a fundamental change in how hard drives work because they went from physical hard drives to solid state. But sizes didn't increase, so we still had a size problem. And Call of Duty Warzone is 109 gigabytes. Call of Duty Cold War was 102. So Vanguard was estimated to be at 102 gigabytes as well. That leaves you a sliver of room on your hard drive for anything else. And when you're dealing with PlayStation 4, when you apply a patch, you actually have to have the size of your game spare because of the way it works. So on a PlayStation 4, it creates a copy of your game, moves it to another area of the hard drive. It will then take the patch and any Delta patches before, apply them on the top. When that's finished, it will then copy it back. That's called like the patch copy process. So you actually have to have twice the size of your game available to actually patch it. So we were in a situation where if Vanguard stayed at the speed it was going to be at, we were going to have a really big problem. So we looked at what takes up space on a COD game. So you have the executable, pretty small, 2%. Our fast files that I mentioned, about 12%. Our movies, they are about 12% as well. Then XPacks, you had your sounds, and a whopping 60% was our images. So we looked at our images, and we thought, well, how much of them do the users actually use? Because this is Modern Warfare, 190 gigabytes of data. How much of that do they actually use? So here is a graph where the color is they've actually accessed it. So there's you can see the image part levels, and then there's the sounds as well. So you can see there that there's, even in someone who's had 100 odd sessions, that they're still only using 26% of the actual data we're putting on the disk, taking up space. So then came along Modern Warfare, and we're like, what could we stream? So let's do MTX texture streaming. It was first created by Eli Bosworth, who coined the phrase extended binary object storage with opportunistic remote transfer via HTTP, or Bosworth. So credit to the name, sadly didn't stick. So we coined it on-demand texture streaming, or CDN texture streaming. We have a content delivery network, so a cloud-based provider, and they have edge servers all over the world. So they have them here in Sydney or in Melbourne, but anyway, and all over the world, so that you're going to get a low latency between when you request the image and when you receive the image. We only downloaded the textures as you encounter them. So if somebody is, got a weird, obscure Season 1 skin that's no longer available, that has to be available for the user who's never going to see it until they run into that person who comes along. And then we'll download that to their machine and they'll get to see it at that point. Dave Cornell and Simon Coutier own the system for Modern Warfare and sort of built the foundation of where it is today. So what did they stream? They streamed customized equipment, weapon skins, and operator skins. So these sort of optional areas that were on a character. And they found it worked quite well for them. And to come back to the problem, so the initial problem was space. So Call of Duty Warzone there at the top, 190 gigabytes. So after we applied the MTX texture streaming, we took off a whoppy 40 gigabyte, but we also had to take up a little bit of space for the cache. So it proved this could work. This now in a live environment, it's working. Then came along us with Vanguard. And we were like, let's do everything. So we had a success criteria. There could be no low-res textures. So no missing images. There could be no pop-in. There could be nothing that the user could see, oh, that's file's just been downloaded, and it's jarring. Multiplayer could never be affected by the extra network traffic, and we needed to have metrics to actually prove we're not affecting that. And our goal was about a reduction in about 25% of package size. So what is a MIP? So an image part, or a MIP, is a MIP map is the set of images at different resolutions. So a MIP 0 is the original image, and then you go down in our parts. So we would put MIP 0 in part 3, we'd put MIP 1 in part 2, etc., going down on Gen 8. We had 4 parts on Gen 8 and 7 on Gen 9. So because there's higher resolution on Gen 9, so you've got more layers you can put other things in. So that I'll also discuss what frequency bias is. This was created by Martin Ecker in COD, and the idea is to evaluate the noise of an image. So here we have 2 images. We have a low frequency image, which is just a wall. It has a decal over the top, so it kind of looks noisy, but it's actually pretty flat image, and it compresses quite well. So when you've got a lower resolution version of it, you won't see a difference. And then I've also got a really high frequency thing, which is this newspaper. I'm using that particular image because that was my bugbear. That was the first image I found where it popped. So when I used an image part that was too low, you could physically see it go from blurry to beautifully clear text, and I went, gotta fix that. So that was where, taking in the frequency bias, I was able to avoid that texture having pop in. So to come back to those image parts, so on Gen 8, there are 4 image parts. Their sizes there is to kind of describe the size. So like image part 0 is obviously the largest one, and then the 2, and it doesn't look perfect, but it is what it is. And Gen 9, we had 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what parts did we drop? So on Gen 8, we took just the image part 3. On Gen 9, we took part 6, 5, and only the low frequency of 4. And by doing that, we were able to get no situation where users could see a lower quality image in runtime than in-game. And I'll go into that later. So where do we store this data? So we reserve space on the consoles, about 12 gigabyte on Gen 8 to start off with, and 30 gigabytes on Gen 9. This will grow over time. So it can go up to as large as 50 gigabytes on both platforms. So if the user uses up all 12 gigabytes, we'll then increase it to 24. If they do that, we go all the way up to 48. And the same with Gen 9. It starts at 30. Users can opt to either go lower, like they can set it to be small at like 20 gigabytes, or let it grow up to 50. Images are then downloaded from the CDN into those XPacks, and we break up those XPacks in that stored space into 1 gigabyte slices. Except on PlayStation 4, where we needed to save on file handles, because on our big maps, we have thousands, well, actually 255 is the max. We have 255 max handles, so we would hit that on a big map, which I'll discuss later. And so we increased the size of the slices for PlayStation 4 to just reduce that amount. When those slices are full, so if you've got all of them full and there's nowhere to grow, we'll discard. So what we do is we track every time a user reads from a slice, and we have last read used. So there'll be a slice, say, from single player when they were playing that, and they've never touched anything in there since, so that's the one we decide to throw out. We throw out most of it. We keep about 200 megabytes of the gigabyte of data that they have read last, just to try and reduce that churn. So how do we select what to download? The streamer encounters an image part not on the disk, and it says, okay, was this tagged from CDN? Yep, it was tagged from CDN. I'll send a request to our Edge server for the image, and then once the download's complete, you verify. Never, ever trust the client. So we had a situation where people were crashing randomly, and we were checking the logs, and we're like, this is like HTTP data in this image part. This isn't like, and then we've realized it's a login service. So we've sent our HTTP request and we've got back their login service data. So that is a situation where we had to like look into what was going on. So never trust the client, always verify your data. So that was fun. Once you've verified the data, make sure it's the correct size and is a valid image. At that point, we update our index. So we have like an index of where all the XPacks are and the hashes and where they go. And on the next update, the streamer will say, sweet, it's available, and shows it. Multiplayer speed limiting. So we're a multiplayer game. Multiplayer is the primary thing. We need to make sure that we're never affecting the multiplayer experience for every user. So we're constantly monitoring this during a game. So the two main things that we checked for was latency and packet loss. If latency increases, we're doing something wrong. If packet loss happens, we stop immediately. So a packet loss means that there is a packet that's getting sent from the server that doesn't get processed in time or doesn't arrive at all and gets dropped. And that is serious, because that could be like, you got shot and dead. So there are things that we have to know that then we don't have to like client-side fix if there's a mistake there. So it's really important that we avoid that. It's really important that we react immediately to that. And the way we did that for Vanguard is we turned it on for 20 seconds and we downloaded it away, and then we turned it off for 10 seconds. And so what we're doing is, because people's pings change all the time, so what we were doing was checking, okay, this is your baseline. Okay, we're going to start downloading. Okay, check it now. While we're downloading, is anything changing? Nope. Okay, good, we're good, keep going. And we had sort of different layers, and you would get faster and faster and faster, and we'd increase the speed checking. So we're just always checking to make sure we're not ruining their life. And if a burst is detected, so if we have a situation where too much data is hitting our processor at the time, we just tell the CDN, chill out, have a rest, and you come back in a little bit. If this happens too many times in a session, we just kill the CDN. We say, nope, this user's got a wild ping, do not make it worse for them. So we just stop it. So how do we debug it? So we used immediate GUI, and this is a basic screen here. So you've got the network state, the slices, and the image part process. So you'll see there in the network state, you see it's active, it's moving at normal speed. We've got the sort of current latency, so there's a ping of active and inactive there. And you see the slices are quite empty. This was a fresh build, so I was doing it off an empty build, so there's nothing there. You'll see all the parts are all high images. They're all the 6th image, because I was on Gen 9. And that they're downloading at about 0.6, which is our target at the time, megabytes per second, because that's 1.2 total bandwidth because we had 2 downloads active at one time. Increasing the speeds. So when we were in single player, we aren't limited by multiplayer experience. So I wanted to flood the network. I wanted to go nuts. I want to see how crazy can we go? How fast can we make it? Because we were looking at about 0.6 per pipe on PlayStation. And I was like, I think we can go better than that. So we messed around with buffer sizes, and explicitly setting them drastically increased our speeds. So we'd gone from a 0.6 up to like a 3 megabytes per second on PlayStation 5. So it was a really, really big win. It was a surprising win. And we implemented our own socket interface between the CDN and the console. We used Berkeley sockets for the Sony platforms, and overlap I/O for Windows. This is now moved to Berkeley for Modern Warfare, so we only have the one system. Gen 8, our most limiting factor was actually file I/O pressure, and on Gen 9, our only limiting factor was SSD write speeds. So what are these write speeds? Well, every new generation has write caps for their SSDs. This was created to protect the lifetime of their SSDs, and they never expected that anyone could get anywhere near hitting it. We hit it in the first minute. So we had to find a way to get around that. So adding tracking for that was important, and the limits are about 1 gigabyte per 5 minutes for Xbox and 2 gigabytes per 20 minutes for PlayStation 5. What's different there is on the Xbox, it's a hard cap. You hit it, TRC failed, you're out. That's bad. On PlayStation 5, it's really, really like, what was the word? Insidious. All it does is slow down the hard drive for everything. So all your saves will get slower, everything goes worse, and nothing stops working. It just gets worse. And it goes really, really slow. It gets down to like 0.1 megabytes, like slower than a regular hard drive. So we had to be really careful not to hit that. And fortunately now there is, tracking for that. They didn't have it at the time. So we had to do our own tracking to make sure we weren't hitting those speeds and breaking it. So the limiting tech is very similar to MP. It's just a different evaluator for single player. So here's a single player debugging screen. Looks awfully like a multiplayer one, but you'll see we've got the current speeds, which are a heck of chunks higher. So we're sitting at what our caps are. It's about 3.3 megabytes per second is what we can get on an Xbox. So we're hitting about that. We track up on that. You'll see the slices are all full because I just did a whole bunch of single player and filled them all up. And you'll notice that the speeds are a lot faster on single player versus the multiplayer. So we're getting about 2 to 5 megabytes per second. So that's our target, and we want to basically we're downloading at the speed they let us. So if we could go faster, we would. But that's all we've got, and that's what we hit. So worked quite well. We did have some challenges though, and the GDK save game was the first one. So in single player, would randomly crash. And the call stack made no sense. It was deep inside the GDK system, and it was an assert about a file handler in save game. And we're like, what? And then we ended up working with the system. We found the problem. So save games weren't given game priority, like game file saves. They were just given system priority. So system priority isn't higher than game. So the save game would say, all right, I'm going to save. And then our CDN system and our read system are both pummeling it. And its save is just bouncing along, going, I'm never important enough. And then after 60 seconds, the internal GDK system says, well, this has obviously been lost, so I'm going to throw it out. And I kid you not, 14 minutes later was one time where recorded. It finally returned. And it goes, hey, I'm done. And obviously the system says, oh, cool, you finished. Where's my file handle? Boom, gone, and just crash. So, and there's nothing we could do to stop that. So we had to stop the CDN immediately whenever you were saving on Gen 8 for Xbox. So that, and we also had to slow our reads, which was insane. But we had to, because that's what it was. And that, fortunately now you don't have to worry about this bug. It's been fixed. But we didn't have that at launch, so this is what we had to do. So that was a fun challenge, I say. So while going fast is good, sometimes, there is a bad outcome. So that was one of them. Our biggest challenge, though, packet burst. So packet burst was all over Reddit, and it was the biggest problem we had. And James and I know well, we spent pretty much all of Vanguard trying to solve this one. So first thing was to prove, was it the problem? And so what we did is we did a A/B test. So half the users had it on, half the users, we just turned all the CDN off while they were active. And you'll see by that chart, it drops a lot while the CDN was off. So unequivocally proved that 20% drop in packet bursts while the CDN is off means that there is a statistical thing that we need to resolve. So with that, I sort of went, right, first thing first, we're slowing it down. So the old way it used to work was similar to single player in that you would check the really low speed. If nothing goes wrong, we go a little bit more. If nothing goes wrong, we go a little bit more. And we got up to like 4 or 5 megabytes per second on like really fast connections. But of course, when you're doing that, you're almost guaranteeing at some point you're going to cause a problem. So the first thing we did was say, just make it slower on MP. So we put 2 speeds in, just low, which is 0.15 megabytes per second, and normal, which is 0.6. Now we have 2 streams active at one time, so you've got to double that for how much bandwidth we're using on those 2 things. When we started doing new tests with that, we found that there wasn't a statistical relevance after that point. We also have done a lot more rate limiting since then. In Modern Warfare, it's a drastically different system and far superior. We're actually having no packet bursts get recorded for Modern Warfare 2 beta, so yes. And so I thought I'd show you the CDN in action. So this is one of our levels in Vanguard. You're loading into the level. You'll see at the start, it's already got a bunch of stuff that's already downloaded while you're in the lobby. So while you're in the lobby, your main character, the first thing we do is evaluate. So it's evaluating here. You can see that the speeds actually climb quite high, and we end up with a packet burst. And the CDN's off. Just point that out. It's not us. Anyway, and then we start downloading, and you can see that there's an active and an inactive speeds, and we're checking them. The speed's set to quite low, so it's downloading quite slowly, and it's just popping along. And then eventually it will turn off. When it's finished, it will then spend 10 seconds off and evaluate the state. So we'll just wait for that. And so it's sitting there and it's inactive now. So now it's checking the speeds. It's going, okay, that's what the speeds are while you're active. And then it will kick in at a higher speed because it said, all right, there was no problem at low. We're going to go to normal. And now it starts downloading at a higher speed, and it just sits in the background. So I start messing around about now, and I think I head in and start shooting people to show that the way this works is it's just in the background. Like you're just playing a game, and the user has no idea this is happening in the background. And that's the whole point. If no one notices it, I'm doing something right. So I'm just wandering around here, and then I head in, I think, coming in, yep. So now you can see it's just downloading away happily in the background, and you're just shooting and playing, and everything's normal. And the images that it selects are based on a priority system from the streamer itself. So right now, you can see that they're all image part 6s, and they're actually parts of the player. So they're all the high resolution textures on the player, which I doubt you've noticed, but there's no pop-in on the character, even though they are higher resolution, just because of the way the streamer works with making sure it doesn't pop. So, and then I come back out. I think my son turned on Netflix about now, and you'll see that the ping starts increasing on the active, and it gets to a point where I'm like disabled. So as soon as it gets too high, we just disable it, and it interrupts the current CDN, goes into rest mode, then we wait, and it will start back at low again in a moment. It'll reevaluate low. It'll say, all right, we've hit a disabled state. Now we'll just reset everything. And it restarts at low and continues along. And you'll see that it's just restarting the 2 that were interrupted, and it just continues from where it was at. So nothing gets lost in that sense. And I'll just let this play out. I think it's got another few seconds. So yeah, you can see it's downloading again in low, and eventually we'll go to wait for inactive. I think it takes ages for the last image to finish. Goes to inactive, evaluates at while it's inactive what the speed is versus the other, goes, okay, we've got no problem, and then it bumps, I think, back up to normal, and away we go. So that's how it would go in a normal game. And if that happens too many times, if it gets disabled like 3 times, it'll just kill. I think it's 2 times now. But yeah, if it happens, we just kill it, because CDN's just optional in the background. And that's the bugbear right there. That's the newspaper that popped right there. That one drove me nuts. Anyway, so what if we turn it off? Because users can turn it off. So an absolute requirement was that if the CDN's off, it still looks COD quality. That was the absolute requirement. And without that, we wouldn't be doing it at all. So this is a fully undownloaded scene. So this is what it looks like without anything downloaded. Still looks pretty good. And here's a fully downloaded scene. So this is every part of this scene, everything, all the high resolution ones have been downloaded. And I'll go back and forward. Now, you might be struggling to find anything, so I'll point something out, and that's the cork on the bottles. So, because that's quite high, it'll be a high resolution image. So you'll see it there, it's like a image part 4, and at image part 6, it's a bit crystal clear. But all in all, not really significant, and especially in a multiplayer action game, it's not going to make a difference. Here's the dolly, which is sort of a really complicated texture. Here, undownloaded and fully downloaded. So you can see that there's not really a great deal of difference between the two, and that was very much on purpose so we don't wreck it. You'll notice that the wood grain, so the wood grain's a bit blurrier here versus here, but the dolly itself is just slightly more clear in the newer version, but not enough for it to be a negative experience for the user. So that was an acceptable result. So results, how did we do on Vanguard? So remember our usable hard drive space. We've got Warzone down to 150 with 12 gig. Cold War stayed where it was, and we were looking at projected at 102. We dropped it by half. Our target was 25%, and we got 50%, plus the 12% cache as well. So huge success. We can now patch our game. So that's pretty good. We're really happy with that. It was a great result. And to go into the sort of stats of how much data came down. So on Modern Warfare, total downloaded data was 220 petabytes of data, average 5 gigabytes per user. Just explain how much more we did on Vanguard. 31 gigabytes average user downloaded at 2 gigabytes a day, and a total of 628 petabytes of data. That's a lot. And so Modern Warfare 2, that's the next game. It's coming out a month or something. How much could we stream? Well, let's go nuts. What could we do? First part, more image parts. This was more of a streamer change, but we added a fifth one for Gen 8 and a 8th one for Gen 9. This was because we were stuffing all of the image parts, the lower ones, in the bottom one. So we lifted all of those except for the very, very minimalist one to the very, very bottom. So that then your always loaded image part 0 was as small as we could possibly make it. Saved us a whole bunch of memory. And we added support for Bink movies or small movies getting downloaded. So the idea here is that over the season of Modern Warfare and Warzone, there is going to be a lot of MTX. And each one of these MTX has a movie to explain, how you do the move or what you do here. And every one of those, if they sit on the disk, is just going to grow and grow and grow. So the idea is we put them on the CDN, and as the user buys the material or buys the equipment, the CDN will then pull that Bink down when they want to watch it and keep it on their machine. But if they never watch it or if they never buy it, it never takes up space. So it's a great way to sort of save that space while still giving the user what they need to learn how to use that. Because also, really low number of people actually check those Binks. So it's a great saving there too. We added a brand new MP rate limiting system. It's far more reactive. Like you probably saw in that last one, it was sort of chugging along at we sort of averaged the ping over 1 second, and the growth was very static. We had these set amounts, whereas now it's every 50 milliseconds we're checking it. And we grow based on we have a target where we're going to grow to, and if the user doesn't hit it, we don't increase the speed because that means there is some sort of lock in there. There is some sort of problem. And a lot of that actually came from buffer bloat, which I didn't discuss here, which is a problem to do with actual network architecture. So when you send a packet from, say, our server to the client, some piece of hardware in there can go, oh, it's only one packet. I'll keep it for the others, and I'll wait for the others, and I'll send them all at once because that's more efficient. But that's terrible for us because we want that packet there as quick as possible. And it would actually create like packet burst for the user because you would end up with these routers that are just blocking this giant bit of data to try and make it more efficient. And we found that some consoles do it too. Not going to name any. But so we proved to them as well, so they will hopefully fix it at some stage. But yeah, and it was a really hard system to solve because it's literally at the hardware level that we have no control over. So that was a good fun system. So our new MP system is far more reactive and does a lot more control there. And it's used in SP as well, just rate limiting, similar to what you saw before. Our write limiting API has been improved, thanks to them actually providing one. And so that's been really good. And the biggest change is probably for our file I/O control. So Vanguard didn't have a big map. It didn't have like a war zone. So the streamer pressure on a war zone or a ground war map is drastically higher than one you'll find on a regular MP map where you just load the whole thing and it's there. So for those ones, when the streamer pressure gets high, we're now pausing the CDN so that the file I/O pressure takes precedence over the downloads, because read pressure you still affect read pressure when you're writing. So you need to respect the hard drive and understand that Gen 8 is what it is. And we actually sometimes pause it even on Gen 9. So when we're loading like a large amount of data. So how did we do on Modern Warfare? So Modern Warfare was 150 gig with 12. Going into Modern Warfare 2, this really emphasized the wins. We've dropped it by a whopping 100 gigabytes. So now the game is a lot of space there. You can actually install Among Us as well. So there's plenty of space there. And it's been a really good success. And we're really happy with that. So from there, we've got where could we go for? So H2 or HTTP2 has inbuilt multiplexing and rate limiting embedded in the protocol. So it's a must do. We're going to do it. We'll move that way. We're looking at priming a CDN cache. So for things like Big Map, where potentially a user like downloads nothing while they're playing because the stream is under so much pressure on Gen 8, we're looking to similar to when you pre-build shaders when you first start a map on PC. Same sort of thing where the user's in the lobby and we just, okay, you're going to this map. We'll just start downloading the environment textures for that map because we know you're going to encounter them. And we'll put like a rating based on how important they are, so how often those textures are hit, and download them for them. So high resolution movie streaming is another thing. So we're looking at essentially Netflix. So have the lower version there, and then just when you go to watch a Bink movie, rather than have it on the machine, just stream it, and hopefully it goes well. We'll find out. It's next game. Improve the cache discarding. So right now, when the cache gets full and we pick a slice, we throw the whole slice out. So an idea being that we have all these image parts that are within there, and we could potentially do it at the more per image part level. So if you've got an image part you just haven't accessed in forever, look at throwing that one out and then sort of rejigging it. But you add a lot of defragmentation issues and a lot of risk there. So we haven't embedded on that one just yet. But we are super open to ideas. So if you've got any, please do share. So I've discussed in summary, I've discussed how the CDN works, what was it supposed to achieve. The proof of concept was achieved in Modern Warfare 1. Vanguard, we got to a 50% package size reduction. Our GDK save game issue was resolved, and the packet burst issues were resolved. For Modern Warfare 2, we had a 100 gigabyte drop in package size, and Bink movies were added to CDN, and we had much better throttling. Major contributors for this were Wade, Eli, Jay, David, Simon, Andrew, Bernard, Martin, Sam, Luke, James, Ole, Gavin, and Martin Donlan, who coined the phrase, if the CDN works, it's a team effort, and if it doesn't, it's Fowler's fault. Questions? This is where you ask them.
You can stay at your seat. You're okay.
Just with what you were saying about it being such a minor difference between the low-res and high-res textures, how worth it do you think this whole system was?
This meeting is recorded, so I will say that it bridged a gap between having high resolution available, because if you are on a 4K TV, like, because I have like the big fancy big TV, and you can see a difference between the 4K images on especially 120 hertz when you're moving really fast, it looks really good. What it does bridge that gap between what's necessary to have a fun game and what's beautiful. So it's kind of a bridging there between, like, you can't tell the artist we're not adding your high res. We're just adding it later. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've got a few questions, but I'll keep it to one. While the data's all on like the SSD, was there a requirement to do anything like making sure that it's in contiguous blocks where the most common textures are close together or anything along those lines, or is that just sort of completely unnecessary on the SSD?
Well, it's still necessary. It is by implicit they are together, because as they're downloading, they're literally going into XPacks like on top of each other. So that we already had implicit binding based on when you're using it. So the concept was that when you redid it, it would be in the same area. We did have to change our streamer for Modern Warfare 2 to prioritize CDN and regular hard drive reads and batch them together, because we were finding a lot of context switches when you're going from one to the other. It was really quite bad. And so that was one of the big things we did, because we didn't run into that in Modern Warfare, because in Vanguard, because we were flat maps. Whereas when you're dealing with big map and you're streaming the whole time, that's when it discovers it. So yeah,
excellent.
That was indeed a thing.
Okay. How do you deal with version updaters? And so you obviously an artist is going to update textures and stuff, and they're not going to be in the pack files. Do you have to add a whole bunch of new pack files with new MIPS, or do you have to go back and change all the original pack files and invalidate their data so they re-download?
So every one of our files is, the way our hash works is we hash the name, we hash the size, and we also hash like if it's a particular type of chunking. So if the size changes, it's a whole different download. So it's a whole new image. So we end up with wastage in the CDN storage, but CDN storage is relatively cheap. You pay in the egress when it moves. So yeah, we also have versioning within our layout for our folder system. So we have like what type of full version. So if we're wiping an entire CDN cache, we'll have a whole other version. We also have like our XPack version, so the way our XPack is. So if we change the header size, we have a whole new version for that, so it'll just move to another. So then the old TU, while it's active, will be title update, sorry, will be up on the old version, and then the new version will move to the new. We had to do that in development for Modern Warfare. We didn't have to do that live in Vanguard. We did have to do that live twice in Modern Warfare 1. So it's well proven.
Hey, I was just wondering if you ever made use of generating MIPS on the client, or if you determined that like you would always download the smaller ones first anyway, or it was just like going to take too much GPU time.
One area I'm considering, and Microsoft is frothing for us to use their DLSS to dynamically generate them. Because yeah, we could potentially just dyne-gen them. So take your version and just dyne-gen the higher versions. I want to try it. It's an innovation project in the plans. But yeah, it's not there yet. But yeah, totally something we could totally do is just generate them and hopefully they turn out right. That's where the artist gets angry if it's a hopeful. So hasn't happened yet, but it is a cool idea.
So I have two questions, but they're both kind of small. I was going to ask how exactly you hash them, but you kind of answered that. But do you hash the file contents themselves? And if not, is there any concerns around that?
So we hash the image part name, the image part size, and the sort of if it's chunked or not, which is kind of a compression thing. So that's each image part. So think of an image part as like a MIP level. So for image part like 3, for Gen 8 we only had image part 3, but for Gen 9 we had 6, 5, 4. So in the name, the image part's actually there. So for each one's different by that as well. So they're all hashed quite differently, if that made sense. And we didn't have any hash collisions, which we did check for.
I was more meaning like the actual contents themselves, like the actual image data. Did that get hashed or?
No. So that would be it's just a straight binary blob. So it would just be the exact pack data that we would show in game, and we just put that on the CD, and you just download it straight to your machine, and then we just put that in the XPack with a little offset, and we say, right, in the XPack, this image part has now downloaded. It has a key, it has the size and the start location within the XPack, and then it tells the system, go use it now.
Okay. And the other question I had was, so you still had somewhat good quality textures in the game already. Was anything else done to get the game that small with that quality of textures?
CDN was the main way we did that. There were images that had to be excluded. So there were particular images, especially in Modern Warfare 2, that were a lot of text. And any Atlas texture, I'm not going to discuss why we have Atlas textures, but we do. They wouldn't work because an Atlas texture is gigantic, right? And so you can't put that on the CDN because any small decrement in that is just going to be really, really drastic. So they're sort of things we had to drop. But yeah, for the most part, that was the main way we dropped the package size. Looking at things like the Bink moving in as well. So taking all those sort of MTX growth, looking at the growth from Modern Warfare 1 and what we could do to fix that going forward. Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, looking further into the future beyond Modern Warfare 2, especially as average internet and SSD write speeds continue to increase and tend to do so faster than, say, the amount of space available on the device, how do you anticipate this system continuing to grow? Do you anticipate, like with the first question, the quality, texture quality between what you deploy by default and what you download, the default coming down even lower, pulling more and more of the game after that initial install, and also more asset types potentially?
Definitely adding more asset types is definitely a thing. I would say that it's a constant battle between, because you can turn it off, right? So if it's low quality and it's off, it's not COD quality, it ain't going on the machine. It's like, so that's where I lose the battle straight away. If they have a screen and if an artist goes, this looks terrible, and I'm like, all right, I lose. So, and there's no other, they have the final say because I don't understand art. I'm like, if you see my program art, you'd be like, ugh. So yeah, it is always going to be a battle between the two of us. But if it wasn't there, you wouldn't get the quality that you want. So yeah. So while I expect those speeds to increase, I don't expect those write caps to increase. I have tried variantly to get them to increase them, and they've gone nope. So it's not changing. So that is our write speed cap period. So I don't see that changing for the entire, maybe Gen 10, but that's like a long time away.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, bud.
Not really a question as such, more of a comment. But listening to your talk now and thinking back to when I first hired you as a junior many years ago, and just seeing what you're doing now, I am so proud of where you have come.
Cheers, bud. Look at you cry. I'm stoked you're here, dude. Like, I'm pumped you're here. I was like, fuck yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, is it a possibility, assuming a really common asset, that you can perhaps share caches between games, so then it becomes even smaller because, you know, a game may have already downloaded a certain asset?
Can't talk about that? I'll say, yes, it's possible. That's all you're getting.
Yeah.
Just a quick one from me. Are you moving any lighting data through the CDN, or is it all just object-based textures?
Object-based textures, yeah. So lighting specifically gets dropped because we do so few resolution versions of them, and it's really apparent when that's missing. Like, yeah, when something looks like when an edge looks like a giant block, you're like, what? Oh, shadow map. Whoops. So yeah, that was one of the in the process that we dropped from CDN.
Piece of cake, thanks.
Hi, I was just wondering if you had any sort of implications or testing for when maybe like Gen 8 consoles or more so PCs like installed COD on like hard drives as opposed to SSDs.
Yeah. So we have a lot of diagnostics for every time they're like what speeds they're downloading at, what they're hitting, any issues. PC is kind of a free range. SSD is pretty much like 95% of our install base. So we know when they run the game what they're running on. And we do have a low spec and we do care-ish about that. But I mean, it's a weird game, right? So a 1% crash bug in all our games that we've ever made, we never fix them, right? A 1% bug in a Call of Duty game is 100,000 people. So we fixed them. And it's a really, really different environment to work in. And so while we do actually care about it. So I'm joking, but we do actually care about load. There is a whole team of people that make sure we're not negatively affecting a low generation PC. And definitely Gen 8, because that's still our biggest seller. It's insane. They can't make enough Gen 9 to anyone to buy them. So yeah.
So did you have to have like a separate like configuration for like those file I/O issues and pressure issues?
No, it actually works the same. So because our streamer is cross-compatible across all of them. So whenever the streamer is like starved for data, so it's saying, it's going, I really need this much data. So then the streamer quality goes down. CDN says, you're off. You're cut right now because I need to focus on read I/O and I need to get stuff in. So, and that works across all of them. So it was probably our biggest performance increase for Modern Warfare 2. And it was a relatively small change because we'd already put in the MP rate limiting. So it just sort of went in with it.
Cool, thanks.
No worries.
And that's time. Thank you very much.
Cool.